Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
Well, hey, Jesse, we are back. It is the very first episode of 2025, which I can't even believe it's 2025. Episode 373. I mean, man, we've taken up a lot of air time talking over the last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. How long it's been? 7 years, 8 years? I don't know.
Years,
a long time.
Yeah.
But I always love the beginning of the new year because it does feel like I get sort of giddy because I like the idea of a fresh start.
Mm-hmm.
And every year I have goals. I know a lot of people sort of scoff at New Year's resolutions. I happen to love them because it's an opportunity for me to take stock of my life and where I am. Yes, I could do it any time of year, but there's something about the beginning of the calendar year that it both creates a sense of urgency and immediacy. And I feel like it's just a natural time to look ahead. So yeah. I got some goals this year. I don't know about you, Jesse. I got some goals. I want to be a little more mindful of what I'm putting into my body. I figure if I could try to eat clean 80% of the time, that's good. And just make that a goal. Don't get too crazy. It doesn't have to be 90, 99%. There's no way I'm going to do that. But just making sure that I'm just eating good, nutrition dense food. And then doing more of the things I love. I haven't played enough guitar and doing some music stuff that I've really enjoyed over the years. I haven't done a lot lately just because of busyness. Mm-hmm. And even things like all the way since I hurt my back in 2015, I've been nervous about trying to go skiing again. There's physically no reason I can't. And so I'm going to give that a try because I love it and miss it. So I don't know. What about you? Are there some things going into this year?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on the new year. I think I love kind of two aspects of it. One, it's an arbitrary excuse to work on stuff, right? So yeah, you kind of get a pass. Like I get to start again. So it's a new beginning, a fresh start, as we're calling this episode. And part of that fresh start is being able to put a season to bed. Like it's done. I mean, there's carryover. There's plenty of things we'll still be working on that are carryover from last year. But in a certain sense, we get to end a season and begin a new one. And I think having permission to do that sometimes is really helpful. This is in the past now. We're moving into the future and just kind of working our way through that. So yeah, I love it. No specific goals really yet. I tend to be more trajectory minded these days. And kind of like you, I want to do some more of the things that I enjoy, figure out how to manage my role well and be present in my family's life. So, be healthy, exercise, all those kinds of things, but thinking in terms of habits rather than like hit targets. I don't know. So stuff like that, but it's an excuse. Now we get to start again, fresh start. I failed. Let's start again. Or not so good. Let's give it another shot. So I love it.
Yeah. And I think it just points to the spiritual truth that, even if it didn't work out last time, doesn't mean it won't work out next time. Or if it did work out last time, why did it work? And make sure that we have gratitude around that. And so anyway, today we're going to be looking in three directions that I think are really important as we start the new year. I think it's a way of starting the new year off in a healthy place. Mm-hmm. And I think also in a productive place. So I think, Jesse, if we're looking in three directions, kind of backward, forward, and right now,
right?
We do that with our lives all the time, but thinking about how do we do that in ministry, or maybe you do want to make it about your personal life. But I think the first direction to look in 2025 is to look in the rearview mirror a little bit. I'm a big fan of trying to evaluate something as soon as you can after you do that thing. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, in real time, we had our Christmas services, and we've already talked about how those services went and anything that we need to fix. It's just built into what we do. And I think in my life, I do this kind of on a rolling basis, but this is a nice time of year to do that. So think about, as a pastor, think about as a church, I think a great thing to do is to look backwards and just simply to give thanks. Where are the places that you can give thanks from 2024? And I think it could be you're literally thanking your staff or your volunteers for the hard sprint they did this last fall.
Yep.
Maybe you want to write actual thank you notes as a way of putting to bed last year, celebrating it and moving forward. I think giving thanks to God for what God has done this last year. We're always big. Well, I'll say I'm always, the first things that come to my mind are the things that weren't good enough, or I want it to be better. But let's flip that this time. Let's look at the things that even exceeded our expectations and get to a place of gratitude. Gratitude, I think, is the secret to joy, because once you start living from a grateful place, you start experiencing more joy and appreciation for where God has brought you. And I think that puts you right in the right posture to move forward. So maybe it's asking yourself, I know I like to ask myself, what went better than expected? Where did God show up? Where did God surprise me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good. Yeah.
How about you? When you think about those questions, Jesse, what are some things that kind of...
Oh, man. Yeah, looking back across the year, it's so hard sometimes for us as leaders because we're forward looking, or we're current problem solving. I was sharing with you before we hit record some challenges we're working through right now. So it's important, though. It's like when we talk about go to the coffee shop with a notepad and nothing else and just dream for a little bit. Gratitude is really vital. So I'm looking back at some of the progress we made with our welcome of new people into our life and seeing a lot of new faces getting involved and taking those steps to move beyond, sitting there on a Sunday, but really engaging, some now in volunteer leadership, or even all the way. We have a couple of people that have joined us since the pandemic who are now serving as elders on our board. So to stop and go, God, thank you for these people. Thank you for our ability to connect with them. And so that's just one thing that comes to mind. And then I can think of a lot of things, but maybe that's just one.
Yeah. And I think getting in that place of where did God really surprise us in a great way? I think is wonderful to just be reminded of, because how many times do we pray for God to show up? He shows up and then we're on to the next thing before even giving gratitude for what he's done.
That's right. Yeah.
So backwards looking first, then I think it's the work of taking inventory. Okay. We give thanks. We sort of put that to bed. And now and we said this years ago, it's like cleaning out the garage.
Yeah.
What's staying? What am I getting rid of? What am I holding on to? And I think this is about asking, it's sort of like up Periscope. Where are we? Where are we as an organization? Where are we as a church? Where am I in my personal life, in my family life? And I start asking questions. Okay, let's name it. What didn't go as expected? What didn't go as expected? So I'll just give an example here of ministry things. So it's actually two questions and it's the same answer in a way. What went better than expected and what didn't go as expected was the new service that we launched. So this last year, it's been a full calendar year plus a month that we launched a new service, a second contemporary service. And the hope was that we would create more room for growth in that service and siphon off some of the young families to that later service. So our current schedule is we do an 8:45 traditional worship and then a 10:15 and 11:30 contemporary. So there's only 15 minutes in between the second and third service. And we doubled up Sunday school so that it was the same exact experience, theoretically, for our young families so that they could spread themselves out over two services.
Right.
Well, what happened was they didn't do it. It didn't work. It did not siphon off because we were getting too full at 10:15, and we knew if we wanted to keep growing, we had to figure out a way to get people to 11:30. That didn't happen. We ended up not continuing Sunday school because it was a huge stress on our staff and volunteers to do 2 hours.
Right.
And there was no kids. They all self-selected to stay at their service of choice, which was 10:15. And so But here's the way it went better than expected is a regular group of people, a lot of empty nesters, a lot of folks in different stages of life started showing up to that service. And it definitely has a core of people that consider that their every week service. And the overall number of people that we worship in contemporary has gone up because of it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways that God surprised us, but it also didn't go as expected. And we still have a problem of overcrowding at 10:15. And we don't know what that answer is. And what we realized is if we want to grow 11:30, we sort of can't because we have a parking lot problem. There's not enough time to get the big crowd out and a big crowd in. We could bring in a small crowd, but not a big one. So we have some things to figure out. But that's an example of what I'm talking about organizationally. It's like what did go, what didn't go as expected.
Well, and I think one that falls squarely under the category of a good problem to have, right? Like
yeah, totally.
You take a shot, didn't go as planned, but it leads you to something you didn't expect. And actually, there's, I think, a really good kind of leadership thought in that, you know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So you put it out there and it missed on one front because you thought it was going to accomplish something, but it hit on another front that was unexpected as you adapted to kind of how it was going to work. And so I do think that I would call that a good miss that ends up being a good win, right? Or something like that. And I think we've had a few things in that same lane where we did, you know, in our two services, we have a multi Sunday school model where you pick whichever service and we'll have the same stuff at both, but we really have all of our families opting for one. And so what we discovered though, is there's a group of our core volunteers and enough people who want to do classes or other groups that run during our 9:00 service that there's a MV Kids Club, a different environment that we made for those people that's smaller on purpose. And it allowed us to do something different with our kids too, with less volunteers and not the full Sunday school model. So I think we're both in that same lane. How do you adapt when you have one idea and it doesn't quite go as expected, but then there's this another opportunity within that to create a win? And I think that's part of taking stock and adapting as you go. But that garage model, or, you know, picture, that metaphor is a really good one. And you and I, we've all cleaned out our garages. Stuff accumulates that you don't need in there anymore. You pull it all out. This is my method anyway. All of it goes onto the driveway, or at least most of it. Right?
I do the same thing.
And then I'm like, okay. And then some of it's just frankly reorganizing, putting things back away where they were supposed to be because it's gotten chaotic. And a lot of almost everything goes back in except for the giveaway bags and maybe the few things that were like, oh, those cardboard boxes need to leave or whatever the things are. But if a lot of it goes back in, but it's just reorganized or put in a different place, or kind of you're able to kind of see it again all clearly. And I love it. After organizing the garage, I go in and it feels clean and nice. I know where everything is and stays that way for a week, but it feels really good, right? So I think it's important to take stock of where you are now so you kind of have this fresh place to work forward from.
And I think a way you could do this organizationally is to sit down with your team, whether that's your, you know, if you're in the Presbyterian world, it's maybe your elders, your session. If you have a staff, it would be with your staff, or maybe a few key volunteers to just sit down, or deacons, and sit down and talk about, okay, where did God show up? Where did it not go as expected? Where did God exceed our expectations? And I think having that conversation as a leadership is so helpful. It'll actually bear a lot of fruit, and it will give you a window into how people are feeling and thinking and perceiving the ministry. So I think there's a lot of things to be said for doing that. Some other questions in this lane of cleaning out the garage would be, what am I grieving? I don't know that I have an answer that jumps to my head, but I think it's a good question, because some of that stuff, like maybe something we wish happened that didn't happen, it will kind of linger and it'll sneak up on us in inopportune times. And maybe we'll feel overly emotional about something, and it kind of clouds our thinking a little bit if we let it. So I think it's good to name it. What am I grieving about this last year? Mm-hmm. Or maybe another question is, what can I own as a leader, and what should I not own?
That's right. Yeah.
Because I don't know. I think we're all our hardest critics, and I don't think that always serves us very well. I think, it's sort of like the head coach, gets too much credit and too much blame. I feel like we're sort of in that category.
Yep.
But I think I don't know, at least for myself, I don't give myself a ton of praise. It's usually criticism, and I end up owning things I shouldn't, and it has a negative leadership effect on me.
Yeah, I think it's discouraging, kind of disheartening or whatever, and there's self-doubt that creeps into that. And I think it's something to be aware of. So what are you grieving? Like, what didn't work? What hard thing is, I don't know what those things are for everybody, but we all have those, I think, where maybe part of what we're grieving is, a vision that didn't quite come about, or maybe it's a family that left the church because they were mad about the direction we were going. Or there's different things like that we have to acknowledge. And then I like your picture of owning it when you need to, but appropriately, like within the right framework. And that, I think, is so, so important, to not beat yourself up too much in an unwarranted way. Be gracious with yourself. And part of that's remembering what did work and how your leadership is effective, and not in a like how great I am kind of way, but none of us are perfect leaders, and we're going to make missteps, and we have to have the humility to own it when we need to, but also to be gracious with ourselves that we're getting a lot of things right most of the time. Yeah. So I think it's so important. Our hearts are important in the midst of all that.
Do you know where this has been showing up for me? It's been showing up in the weirdest way. So I've noticed, I noticed because I just had a conversation. We had our traditional choir concert for Christmas, which we do every year. And it was before the concert. I was talking with a member of the church. I've noticed I have a hard time celebrating success or handling compliments. And for example, this member, older member, been around a long time, very traditional, but also very happy that the church is growing, even though it's not growing in his demographic. Excited that contemporary worship's growing, and he's funny. He's like, that's not really my thing, but I'm so glad that it's growing. And he and his wife were sort of marveling at the growth there, and I found myself, I don't know what this is about, but I had a hard time accepting it. I was sort of like, yeah, but it's like, it was I responded weird, and I don't know what that was about. And I'm guessing it had to do with kind of some latent imposter syndrome stuff that happens.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, I know it's not me. I'm part of it, but I don't want to sit here and take too much credit. Because I don't deserve that much credit. On the other hand, why can't I just accept it and say thank you? And
isn't that exciting? Isn't that really great? Yeah, I don't know what it is for leaders, that imposter syndrome, self-doubt, maybe because we've been trounced down a lot of times, it feels vulnerable to accept people's gratitude, or I don't know, but I do think maybe you and I need to go do a little therapy. We'll do a joint therapy session.
I think we should. And we'll record it for the podcast. It'd be great.
Yeah, we'll just let everybody listen.
Possibly go wrong. Yeah, we'll record it live. It'd be good. But anyway, I think that stuff comes out when you start asking questions like, what can I own? What shouldn't I own? I think these are good questions, because again, I think this really does clear the slate, gives us a fresh start, so that we come at whatever we're hoping to do next in a healthier place.
Yeah.
And then I would say the last important question, I mean, I'm sure there's many, but the last one that I had written down for cleaning out the garage is then really just say, well, where are we? Like, what do the numbers say? What can we measure, and what do the measurements tell us? They won't tell us the whole story, but they'll paint a picture as to what's going on.
Yeah, it gives you a snapshot in time of kind of where are we generally, what's our trajectory, what's, all that. So it's kind of nice to get a sense of, hey, compared to this time last year, here's where we are. Those kinds of things are helpful to just kind of take a quick peek at and get a clear sense. And then I think that helps with the next part, which is starting to look forward.
Yeah. So as we've said, the windshield's bigger than the rear view mirror. It's all about where are we going. In our faith, it's about celebrating who we are and having gratitude for today, and also looking at where am I trusting God next. So it's all about forward movement and vision. What is the future that you want to see happen for yourself, for your church? What's the future that God's calling you toward?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great time to just plug our own series that we did in December. We had a 4-parter all about dreaming big.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one to pop in and listen with your team. And just even if you listen on 1.5 or 2 times speed, so you get through a little faster, that's fine. You know, if we sound like chipmunks, as long as I think it's kind of going through it with your team and asking those questions in those different categories of vision. So I believe it's episode 367, 8, 9, and 70. We're all in that series. So it's a great time to just sort of go back and to start thinking about vision, and also throw up a link. If you go to our show notes, which is on reclaimleader.com, there's a button for it. Just go to show notes, and I'll put a link to, we put out a guide last year that was kind of like, how do you quick start change? How do you quick start vision? I'll throw that up on there too for anybody that wants it if you haven't gotten that yet. So, yeah, I think this is a great time to do this. And the way that I'm going to be handling these 3 areas is to literally have 3 different meetings with our leadership team. And in the course of January, take one subject each meeting. Where have we been? Where do we have gratitude? Cleaning out the garage. Where are we now? And then where do we think God's calling us to go? And usually what happens is it creates all sort of really positive dialogue, and you feel the Lord talking to you through one another, which is kind of the whole point.
Yeah. And if there's stuff that needs to be dealt with, it's going to get unearthed and noticed. And if everybody else is going through their various ranges of emotions about everything too, that, so I think it's a wise course to do some looking back, do some taking stock, and then, hey, so what does that mean? Where are we going to go? And then starting to get back into that vision, mission mindset of, I can't wait to see what God's going to do next. So yeah, so good, Jason. And I like that idea. I might use that actually with our team. Let's look back. Let's take stock. Let's look forward. It's solid.
Awesome. Well, anyway, pastors, I know that if you're like us, you're still tired.
What do you mean?
He's still tired from 2024.
Let's all take a sabbatical for
right. And maybe the thought of jumping back into this is just a little much. That's okay. But I want to encourage you, whenever you feel like you're up for it, I do think it's a really helpful exercise to do. And man, another year of podcasting. I think it's just awesome to get to keep talking about this. And man, do we need the church to succeed more than ever, to be healthy more than ever? I mean, so many people are hurting, and we know that we have the remedy, and yet we get stuck so inward focused and we forget what God's calling us to do. And my prayer for 2025 is that we would not forget, that we would be focused on how are we going to keep reaching people with the gospel. I mean, I don't care how big of or how small of a town you're in, there's plenty of people to go around who need to hear about Jesus.
Yeah, I love it. And we're 2025 is a quarter of the way through the 21st century, Jason. It blows my mind.
That's kind of crazy.
And it kind of goes, oh, wow, how time goes flying by. And we have our part to play. We get to be stewards of this season, these moments of leadership in the church. And so we really do hope that these conversations are as helpful to you listening in as they are to us as we're wrestling through how do we faithfully lead in complex times in the midst of uncertainties and all the things people face. And, the great thing is that we all have that opportunity to come be a part of what God's doing and experience his provision and all the ways he's going to work through us, kind of sometimes, frankly, in spite of us. And that's how I feel about it a lot of times as a leader. So anyway, grateful to be in it with you, Jason. Look forward to another fantastic year of conversations. And we're going to be like well into the 400s by the time we get to the end of 2025.
That's crazy. Well, and the whole reason we do this is because ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. Thanks everyone for listening. Looking forward to this year. If you have a chance, share it with your colleague. Get the word out about us. We'd appreciate that. Leave us a review. Hit that subscribe button, as everybody says. But really, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.